everybody, and welcome. My name is Dr. Jennifer Campos, and I'm the Associate Scientific Director of AgeWell. I'm very glad to see so many of you joining us today to learn more about how technology-based solutions can support older adults to maintain their autonomy and independence. Today, we will touch on what it means to be autonomous and independent, how AgeTech can help older adults make their own decisions and maintain independence, as well as current challenges and exciting possibilities for the future of AgeTech in this area. This topic means a lot to us here at AgeWell. In fact, autonomy and independence is one of our 8 challenge areas. These are areas that we've identified where there are critically important but complex problems facing older adults and their caregivers, and where we are driving research and innovation to find solutions. And I'm thrilled to say that we're seeing some very exciting innovations emerging from AgeWell supported work in this area, including, for example, the Steady 2 glove designed to stabilize the wrist joint and forearm to reduce hand tremors, developed by Canadian company Steadyware Inc. MaxMinder, an app designed to support older adults who may need a little help to remember and manage their medications, activities, or appointments. Braze Mobility Inc.'s blind spot sensors, designed to transform a regular wheelchair into a smart wheelchair, able to prevent collisions. And a computer-guided virtual gym designed to deliver personalized exercise instruction and feedback to promote physical and cognitive health among older adults. So we're going to talk more about technologies like these and how they can help people maintain their autonomy and independence in a moment. But first, I'd like to acknowledge that although we are meeting virtually, we do operate on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations, which have cared for the land for thousands of years, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This land remains home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty, which is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work today. You may live and work in different territories, so we encourage you to reflect on the land on which you are located and to consider your relationship to that land and to the people who are the traditional keepers of that land. Thank you. Okay, I'd also like to share with you a little bit of information about AgeWell. So AgeWell, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is Canada's technology and aging network. Our vision is that Canada's leadership in technology and aging, sometimes referred to as AgeTech, benefits the world. AgeWell's mission is to develop a community of researchers, older adults, caregivers, partners, and future leaders that accelerates the development of technology-based solutions that make a meaningful difference in the lives of Canadians. So that translates into support for over 300 researchers at 50 universities and research centers across Canada, over 1,300 trainees, over 70 Canadian AgeTech startups, over 180 technologies, services, policies, and practice that are in development or are already on the market. It also includes 4 national innovation hubs and the crucial involvement, of course, of over 5,000 older adults and caregivers, many of whom are joining us today. So now I know that we are all eager to hear more about autonomy and independence. So I'm going to now turn to our panel. Just a reminder that if you have any questions or comments while you're listening, please go ahead and type them into the chat box, which you can find by clicking the icon shaped like a little speech bubble. We are going to be recording today's session, so it will be available to watch again on our YouTube channel. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lili Liu, who is the leader of AgeWell's Autonomy and Independence Challenge area. Lili, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your research fits into today's topic of unlocking the potential of AgeTech to support autonomy and independence?
Thank you, Jenny. Hi, everyone. So I am an occupational therapist. I'm also a professor at the School of Public Health Sciences, and Dean of the Faculty of Health at the University of Waterloo. And my research focuses on the adoption and acceptance of AgeTech by older adults, as well as their caregiver partners and service providers. And now for me, AgeTech refers to how low tech all the way to high-tech innovations, and sometimes even no-tech strategies can help older adults maintain their autonomy and independence. And I think the key is to focus on autonomy of older adults. In other words, their preferences and choices in decision-making.
Okay, wonderful. It's so wonderful to have you here. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Noelannah Neubauer. Noelannah, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you're going to be touching on during today's discussion?
Yeah, I sure can. So I hold two different roles. So by day, I'm an occupational therapist, system case manager with Alberta Health Services in the Edmonton zone. So in my role, I act as a bridge for complex clients, many of which are older adults, as they're transitioning between different healthcare systems. So between hospitals, between home, or between long-term care and supportive living. As well, I provide intensive case management and rehab supports for home care clients to reduce the risk of rehospitalization after they're discharged home. And then by early morning, sometimes as well as evening, I'm a research assistant with the Aging and Innovation Research Program at the University of Waterloo that is led by Dr. Lili herself. I've been working with her for the last 9 years now. And so what I'll be touching up on, what Lili already had brought forward, is I'm going to be focusing primarily on autonomy and just, again, finding different tools and different ways we can allow those older adults to be able to make decisions so that they can continue to live with their lives and in the community.
Okay, fantastic. We are very much looking forward to that. And last but surely not least, we have Tracy McGilvery who's joining us today. So Tracy, can you please tell us a bit about yourself and what you're going to bring to the discussion today?
Sure. Thank you, Jenny. And I really want to thank AgeWell for hosting these sessions and for their invaluable support to so many new ventures like ours. So I'm Tracy McGilvery, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Action Independence Mobility, Inc., and we're the creators of the RAMAX Lift. But I spent over 3 decades in the technology industry, much of it as a senior executive leading global organizations, and I retired midway through 2019. At that point, my parents had been living with me for about 20 years, and they were in their early 80s. And as their health began to decline, my husband and I became part-time and then eventually full-time caregivers at end of life for each of them. And we saw so many gaps to help my parents maintain their independence as they aged, which is what led us to where we are today. So thank you again, Jenny.
Okay, that is phenomenal, and we're so grateful to have all three of you here today speaking about a really important topic. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to Lili to start off with the presentations.
Thanks, Jenny. I think a slide is going to come up. So yeah, I'm going to essentially focus on what we mean by autonomy and independence. And typically, I think when we use these two words, we often use them interchangeably. But what we would like to propose is, what we have been proposing is that they're actually separate terminologies or separate meanings, because it would help us to, I think, interact with our community or our loved ones in a more meaningful way. So what we've been doing is proposing that autonomy is actually focused on an individual's ability to make decisions for themselves. And it's often associated with insight into themselves, or self-knowledge, we call it, their sense of individuality, also what they consider they're responsible for, so their level of responsibilities, and also a sense of dignity. In contrast, independence is what we use frequently to describe our abilities to perform an activity without the help of others. It's often associated with the goal of health service providers, and we often think of independence as successful aging. The Western worldview tends to view autonomy and independence as dichotomous. In other words, they're two separate entities, with sort of dependence or limited autonomy viewed as quite undesirable. But in reality, individuals experience autonomy and independence actually on a continuum. And in fact, some cultures and groups see autonomy and independence as a continuum and not as all or none, as we tend to do in the Western culture. When we do see autonomy and independence as sort of an all or none entity, it can result in ageism, further compounded by intersections of gender and race, and also various cultures. So you can imagine if an individual who's going through rehab is being rated or categorized as dependent or independent rather than the level of dependence or independence, then we can easily categorize them into sort of a negative way of seeing their abilities. What we like to propose instead is that we look at these two terminologies or concepts as relational autonomy and interdependence, as you see in this slide. So on the very bottom, or the foundation or the roots of this tree, we expand the concept of autonomy by incorporating various elements of support and older adults' choices. And these are represented by the words that you see along the roots: identity, one's beliefs, one's value system, family, social network, spirituality, one's worldview, and also who we perceive as experts, the health professionals, for example, that we consult with. It even includes cultures beyond the Western worldview. And you can imagine then when we start to look at autonomy in this much broader way, then we can all relate to it, and that there are going to be temporary or moments in our lives where we rely on one source of information or consultation or support to help us with our autonomy. And then if you go up the tree and you see the leaves, then we're looking at the various components that contribute to our independence, or what we like to call interdependence. So it's no longer a negative thing to think that we are interdependent on our technology. I'm sure many of you in the audience own a smartphone, and we can probably all agree that we are interdependent on our mobile devices, and yet that's not considered to be a negative thing. So interdependence acknowledges this interconnection that we have between people and the human and also non-human aspects of our lives that affect our ability to perform activities. So these aspects can be depicted as social, physical, natural environments. AgeTech, which is what we're focusing on today, can help us and be more independent, but we are somehow also interdependent on the technologies. And we've also included policies and services, because many times access to these kinds of services or resources relies on policies and policymakers. So while dependence is a natural part of life in which people are reliant on one another, the land, the systems, and the objects, no one is entirely independent in all situations. So we propose that interdependence is also very much valued in some cultures, and that relying on other people in the natural environment is actually a norm. And so we see this in, for example, the Indigenous populations. So what we're going to do next is show you two videos. One is of an elder or a knowledge keeper who works with us here at the University of Waterloo. And the other video is Marnie Panas, who is a trans woman. And I'll conclude with some comments after the videos. They're only about 2 to 3 minutes each.
Well, when I think of autonomy and independence, the Indigenous people in Canada have always made sure that our elders would have the availability to maintain a lifestyle, to continue on a life that they're comfortable with. And when it's important for the families to recognize our elders' role in their family and to give them the ability to continue on a life and teach our children. We were always told to put our elders in a high profile. We didn't have places to put our elders because we took care of them. So the importance of the elders in the home, it really makes a big difference with an elder. They don't feel like they've been pushed aside and not cared for anymore. Now they have a purpose. And that'll extend their life. That'll give them a chance to, feel the wealth of their knowledge. Because in our culture, when we speak to our elders, we learn about our past, we learn about our families and our communities. And that's really what the elders want to do. They want to make sure that they continue that. But, if we put them in a home or set them aside, they feel that they're not contributing anymore. So a lot of times they'll pass away sooner than they should. I have to say our experience hasn't been very good in Canada. The families who need this service, a lot of them won't participate in these services because there's been a lot of abuse to Indigenous people, elders, and they just refuse to accept those types of things. And I think it's terrible, that the families have to go through those scenarios and not have equal services in Canada. But, in my experience, it hasn't been very good for Indigenous people. Well, I think researchers need to understand Indigenous people better by building relationships with them so that they can build into these complex systems, better systems that will help Indigenous people. It's really relationship building. And the more you know about people, the more that you're better to perform better services for them. So I think it's really important that institutions, schools, researchers, people in those capacities start to understand the Indigenous culture a lot better. Not just Indigenous culture, but all cultures. We're starting to look at technology in the Indigenous communities because a lot of times the First Nation communities are away from the urban settings, so it's not easy to get to a hospital. So up in north, like in areas where we can't get doctors to come up there, technology, they can actually utilize online stuff, so they can still provide the services up there. So I think it's crucial, that we provide, today's technology to some of our traditional ways of healing. It's really crucial for the elders that need that service. Well, when I think of autonomy and independence, the Indigenous people in Canada have always made sure that our elders would have the availability to maintain
Just bear with us. I think we're loading the second video.
Future, what happens to me today. Autonomy and independence means that I have say over my care, over my future, what happens to me today. And that's something that is particularly important for trans people as I think about, as I started to age and start to see, one day I may find myself in a position where I cannot advocate for myself. And I don't want people making assumptions about who I am, the care that I need, the basic human dignity type of activities that makes me feel my whole self. I don't want to be in a position that people are going to make assumptions about those things. Those are the things I've had to think about every day of my life to ensure that I live my full life in a way that is authentic to me, that is meaningful to me, that doesn't put me in a position for others to make decisions about what I need based on how I look and who I am. Where autonomy is a real impact is on the systemic things. Like, what does your medical records look like? Electronic medical records. Are they inclusive of everybody who comes into that care experience? Those are the barriers that we often see is more of the systemic issues that, making us try to fit into a system instead of looking at our systems and having them fit us. And that's probably the biggest challenge that I've experienced in relation to autonomy. My advice is to treat people with the parts they have and what they're presenting with, and not to make assumptions about their journey and who they are and the care that they need, again, based on what a gender marker says or what their body looks like, but truly to treat them for why they're there. And that takes getting to know your patient. If we only look at developing products and tools and resources based on our own lived experiences and our own perspectives, then we are going to leave people behind. And the best way of doing that is to truly be inclusive, even in the design, having people involved who are most directly impacted, the people with lived experience, to be part of the decision making, the part of the development and design and the testing and the communicating about it, will ensure that we're creating technology that can truly be used by everybody and for everybody.
Thank you. I'll just finish by commenting that these are two of the scenarios or personas that we have included in our book, Autonomy and Independence, Aging in an Era of Technology, that was published through AgeWell. These are two of the 9 personas. The first one with our Indigenous elder was a different elder in the book, but speaks about the use of technology for elder chats and for cultural sharing to go, and Indigenous ceremonies during the pandemic, and how important that was to bring communities together because they were all isolated. They talked about virtual smudging, which was in fact how I met Mayingan Henry, our elder at the University of Waterloo. Eventually he came to join us. In the second video where you met Marnie Panas, I'll just say that according to Marnie, technology has really allowed her to curate herself and to express her gender and be authentic and feel safe behind a screen, as she puts it. But she explains it in much more depth in the book. So I'll finish there and pass it over back to you, Jenny.
Okay, thank you so much, Lily. I think that was a really important way to start the conversation today by providing some definitions that maybe were allow people to take a little bit of a different perspective on how we can think about independence and autonomy, and to see those videos really put the discussion today in an important context. So thank you so much. I'm now going to pass it on to Noelannah.
Awesome, thank you. We'll just wait for the slide to pop up here. Perfect. So I was asked by AgeWell to be able to give an overview of a product that was funded through AgeWell called the interactive version for the Canadian Guideline for Safe Wandering. So to give you a little bit of a background that led to this work, is there were many years that actually led up to its development. So I did my PhD at the University of Alberta, was actually supervised by Lili herself between 2015 and 2019. 2015 was actually when AgeWell was born, and so I've been fortunate to continue to be a part of AgeWell's journey as I've been a part of my own. One of the key pieces for my doctoral thesis at the time was to be able to look at the risks associated with getting lost and going missing among persons living with dementia, as more and more over the years, we're starting to see them quickly becoming one of the #1 calls to police that are being reported as missing. And then I also wanted to be able to explore what strategies could be used to try to reduce this risk, so we're seeing less of these different missing incidences. So one of the outcomes that came out of my doctoral thesis was the development of a PDF version of the Canadian Guideline for Safe Wandering. Essentially, I didn't want to repeat the wheel based off of what was out there in the literature, but I wanted to be able to come up with a very basic 2-pager that really helps to summarize the different risks that are associated with getting lost and going missing, what would put someone at a particular risk, and then what are some different types of strategies that they could apply. So within this PDF version, the risks were split by low, medium, and high risk. There was a different check mark box underneath that would what would put that person at the particular risk. And then below that, we'll just keep it on the other slide. Sorry, I'll tell you when to go next. And below that, they would have the different strategies that they could be able to put based on that risk level. Like every PDF version that's only 2 pages, of course, there's downfalls where there's a lot of information and key messaging that was missed. We wanted to keep it as simple as possible for those with lived experience to be able to apply it. So the dream was to be able to come up with an interactive version so we could further expand on it. So then fast forward it into 2021, I was fortunate to again get funded by AgeWell again to be able to turn the PDF version of the Canadian Guideline for Safe Wandering into an interactive version. So I was able to work alongside Dr. Leah Zane Kennedy at the Stratford School of Design and Business at the University of Waterloo. Leah was paramount with her user experience design expertise. We're also able to bring in students from Waterloo to be able to help in its development. And similar to the work that I did during my PhD, right from the beginning of the creation of the interactive version, we were able to bring in persons with living with dementia as well as care partners so they could help us in the development of the design of the website itself, but then also helping with the different prototypes along the way. So what you can see on the screen here, so this is the landing page, it's canadiansafewandering.ca. So essentially when you land on here, one of the key pieces I always like to highlight that just shows the impact of those with lived experience is you can see the image that's right in the dead center of this woman who doesn't have gray hair, who's walking her dog out in the community. This was really able to show and be able to get away from the stigma that comes with dementia. Just because you have dementia doesn't mean that you're old, and it doesn't mean that you're in a facility. So this was a good idea of this. And with this image as well, and the journey is we really wanted to be able to highlight that when you're at risk of getting lost and going missing, it truly is a journey, just similar to the journey that you have with dementia. On the screen, you'll see that you have more information. So essentially, if you ended up scrolling down, you'd be able to see what is safe wandering, why is it important, who developed it. But one of the key pieces that came with this website is that they were able to click on assess risk level. Now we'll go to the next slide. And then once they get to there, then there's 6 different questions that were based off of the literature that individuals would be asked to answer, as that would help to highlight what level of risk they're at for going missing. So these questions included, how often do you get lost? What is your living status? How often do you go into the community? How do you manage stressful situations? What time of the day do you typically leave your home, as well as how do you typically get around? So what they would do is they would answer each question, is as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, is essentially would really help to again make things as easy as possible, user-friendly. As they're answering questions, they're actually able to see exactly where they are. And one of the other key pieces that came with even answering some of these questions is not only are you answering a question to know what your risk level is, but we really wanted to be able to weave in education along the way. A lot of this was inspired by some of the work that was being done by the World Health Organization. So we can see here on question number 6, so the question, how do you typically get around? I responded, I take public transit. But then underneath that, there's some tidbits of strategies that they can apply. So some people leave their homes or residence from time to time. And if you take public transit, it's a good idea to let a family member or friend know where you plan to go and when you expect to return. Also consider a way to plan the route, such as writing down the route, using Google Maps on your phone, or letting the bus driver know which stop is there. So again, trying to weave in that along the way. We'll go to the next slide. And so then after they answer those 6 questions, based on the little algorithm that we had, it would spit out what level of risk that person was at for getting lost. So we can see here, based on my responses that I put in, imagine that was someone living with dementia, I'm at a medium risk. So again, along with giving that information, there's more education, such as you're not alone, highlighting that you can transition from a low level of risk to a high level of risk at any moment, and really emphasizing the importance of using prevention and putting some different strategies in their tool belt to reduce their risk. So then what they can do after they see what risk level they're at is that they can click on See Strategies, and then it'll have the different strategies that they can use based on what the risk level is. Again, like everything that we have, there's always downfalls when you're trying to create an initial iteration of it. So for this work, and unfortunately is only available in English, but we're hoping if we ever had future funding, is that we can turn it into French as well as other different languages. As well, the C strategy section was a little bit more, it was much smaller, but over the last 3 years, our team at Waterloo has had the chance to be able to get funding through Public Safety Canada, so the Search and Rescue New Initiatives Fund. And we've been fortunate where we've been able to further expand on the risk levels, actually taking Canadian data, thousands of data points that Dr. Antonio Mingo-Cruz has gone through, and hopefully being able to put that into this, this resource. So then we're able to split out exactly what risk level they're at using Canadian data. The other key piece as well, to be able to finish that up, is that we have created a toolkit that we're about to launch that will be able to be woven into this, where it's 40 pages, which has a lot more information. So again, allowing people living with dementia to be able to have a better choice and helping them in their decision making. Just to be able to close it off, I did bring in Christine Thalker, or she's now Christine Aiken now, on her experience of working with this work. So she had stated, working on the Canadian guideline for safe wandering was empowering for myself as a person living with dementia. Ensuring practical and respectful help is available to people living with dementia and care partners. Being a part of this project has given me hope and showed me that together we can and are making a difference in the lives of people living with dementia.
Thank you so much, Noelannah. It was super important and super interesting to hear about your journey on the development of this really fantastic resource. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And with that, I will pass it along to our last speaker, Tracy. So Tracy, you're muted, and I think we're just getting the slides ready as well. But if you want to say a few words while we wait, then you can unmute.
Sure. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So our journey began back in 2019 when Dad started falling regularly at home. And luckily, he was never injured, but he was unable to get back up on his own. And Mom was just not able to help him. She was the same age. So if neither my husband or I were home, they would end up calling our wonderful next door neighbors, or more often, 911 for EMS. So I scoured the market looking for something they could use, but there was just nothing suitable for them to use at home. There were lift devices out there for sure, but they weighed between 55 and 124 pounds. Most of them required some assembly and definitely able-bodied assistance to use them effectively. And Mom and Dad were just simply not able to use those at home. So upon doing some additional research, I realized this was actually one of the most significant challenges facing our fastest growing age cohort. 1 in 4 adults age 65 and over will fall at least once a year, and many of them multiple times. And that number doubles to 1 in 2 for those over 80. You know, fortunately, most don't suffer any significant injuries, but almost half of them need help getting back up. And even when current fall prevention best practices and strategies are employed, falls still happen. 5% and growing of all EMS calls are for lift assists. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related hospitalizations for older adults, and hospital stays average 11 days longer than other reasons. And falls and the fear of falling are one of the leading reasons for admission to long-term care and assisted living. And yet over 90% of us want to age at home or with family. So it was at that point I reached out to who was now my co-founder, Liam. He was a mechanical engineering student at the time. And we decided to team up to create a better solution, something that was intuitive and simple, a little lighter weight, and easy to use at home. We incorporated early in 2020 and have been iteratively developing, testing, and getting feedback since then. And here we are 4 years and 5 prototypes later, and have arrived at the Ray-Max lift, which you can see the image on the screen here. And it's named after my father, Ray, for whom this all started. So Liam and I were then quickly joined by Suling Duong, who was a very experienced occupational therapist, and she had specialized training in falls prevention and post-fall interventions. And so she helped us quickly evolve from focus on fall recovery to fall prevention through a few clever design changes. Because 62% of falls occur when people are walking, bending, transferring, or standing. And the Ray-Max lift assists with these movements and reduces the associated strain and fatigue with those actions. So as you will see in this first video clip, if you guys want to get ready to show that, it'll highlight independent fall recovery, and then I'll just sort of explain a couple of things after that. So if you want to go ahead with the brief video clip. So as you can see in that video, the seat lowers flush to the floor. It rises to a height of 24 inches and it stops anywhere in between. So people can lower themselves to whatever height they need, knowing they can return to a position where they can stand easily, which is, as Su-Ling has drummed into us, is where the hips are above the knees. And that's all done with the simple push of a button. And so this eliminates the need for people to bend over. And in the unfortunate event of a fall, they can lower the seat to the floor from the floor, raise the handles up and either hip or butt scoot backwards on, lower those hands themselves. And there's also a button at the top for a caregiver that a caregiver can reach without, again, having to bend over themselves. We have a second video clip, and you're going to see how it serves as a transfer aid. And again, I'll just explain a couple things afterwards. So as you can see there, you simply place the Ramex lift beside the seating surface that you want to get up from. You lower the seat to the same or slightly lower height, raise the nearest handle out of the way and do a pivot transfer onto the seat, lower that handle and raise yourself up again to where it's easy to stand. So it's great for cars, sofas, chairs, benches, beds, and yes, it can even be used for toilet transfers because we also have a rotating seat designed into it. And you can actually see that demonstrated on the long video that's on our website. So as I said, that seat can rotate up 90 degrees out of the way, so it allows a person to safely stand or walk inside that frame for added support. They can safely work and approach counters, sinks, stoves, and maintain that upright posture, knowing they have the safety of the device surrounding them. As well, the frame folds inward. You saw that a brief clip of that. It folds inward. You can navigate narrower spaces, and it folds all the way in for storage and transport in vehicles or on public transportation, including airplanes. It comes with it has a rechargeable battery. It's a medical grade battery, which can do over 30 lifts at a full load of 300 pounds on a full charge. And you plug it in near the top, so there's no bending over required. So it comes with the charger, it comes with a cup holder that's actually cleverly designed so it works for cups and mugs with handles, and a pouch on the back side of the backrest so you can easily store your mobile phone, your keys, your wallet, and again, no bending over required to a basket that's down low. And so, as I said at the beginning, we've been getting lots of feedback from potential users, caregivers, and clinical experts since our first prototype back in early 2021. It's been evaluated independently through multiple research studies led by Dalhousie University and the Center for Technology Adoption for Aging in the North, CTAN, which is actually a partnership with the University of Northern British Columbia, Northern Health, and AgeWell. And we're in the midst of an independent pilot field trial led by Dalhousie University in partnership with Northwoods Continuing Care and Shanex Corporation, where they have deployed the Ramex lift to real-world users in their homes to ensure it's ready for broader use. So we do expect to have the final market-ready product ready within the next 2 months. And because it's a Class 1 medical device, we'll have to file our regulatory applications with both Health Canada and the US FDA. And we expect to do that late spring, early summer. And we anticipate we'll be ready for consumer and institutional use by the late summer. So over the last 2 years, we've actually doubled in size as an organization. So we've added an experienced orthopedic surgeon and an academic leader as our chief medical officer, and in full transparency, also my older brother, a chief financial officer who I've worked with for decades, and a chief revenue and commercial officer, secret, he's also my husband, to really strengthen our team and our market readiness. And every single one of them has had similar lived experience with their parents. So we are absolutely united by a common purpose and values. And I guess simply put, we created the Ramex lift because we just want a world with fewer falls and more freedom.
Okay, thank you so much, Tracy. That was amazing. It's echoed in the chat, as you'll see in a little bit. Some people commenting that this is a brilliant innovation. So we really thank you for sharing your personal story, and how your personal story also fueled and informed this really phenomenal innovation. So thank you so much for that. Now, at this point, we are going to start our conversation with our guests on this webinar, our attendees. And so I would like to encourage everybody to please be liberal in asking your questions in the chat box. To kick things off, I am going to ask our panelists a question to start. So I'd like to ask you, what are some of the challenges when it comes to developing and implementing technology-based solutions to support autonomy and independence? So can you maybe just comment on some of your own experiences personally and in your kind of research or innovation pathway or journey? What some of the challenges you face when it comes to development and implementation? I don't know if anyone has a...
I could go, but I always like to let Lili take the lead first.
Certainly, thanks for that question, Jenny. I think a challenge in the development is that end users are not involved either early enough or throughout the process. Sometimes they're involved in the early stages of consultation, even just to identify a problem, but then they're forgotten throughout the process. And they may be brought in at the end to test the usability, but they didn't have any input into the design. Another challenge related to specifically to implementation is access, and Noelannah can speak to that personally, just availability, affordability, the timeliness and the support of these kinds of technologies.
Yeah, so then I can lead off with you, Lili. So so to speak on behalf of the implementation. So for me, I did a PhD before I became an OT. So I was already bred into the AgeWell way. When I became a clinician, I was really excited to be able to start to applying some of my knowledge and bringing more technologies out into the community. But then the sad part is that I've now been a clinician for 2.5 years now, and I have yet to be able to incorporate any of these technologies, which is it's awful to say, but it really comes down to a lot of cases cost. So a lot of clients that I have, we're talking about seniors that don't have any money. They can barely afford transportation. They can barely afford food. A lot of cases as an occupational therapist, I rely on government funding. So in Alberta, we have Alberta Aids to Daily Living. Depending on what their funding is, they're either cost share, where they end up paying a maximum of $500 per calendar year, or they're cost share exempt, where again, the government will pay for the entirety of the equipment. But the equipment that's funded through our program, and I'm sure it's the same across the other provinces, is that it's very restricted to the basic OT stuff. So talk about wheelchairs, you talk about floor lifts, but any of these new innovations that have come out there, it's not funded through AEDL. And I've tried even a GPS device if they're at risk of getting lost and going missing, but if they don't have the money, then it can't come in. The other key piece as well is that a lot of clinicians were already bogged down, as you've probably been hearing in the news. There's a massive shortage of us. And so unfortunately, we don't really know what technologies are out there. I do, but my coworkers don't. And so it's important to be able to have repositories or something that clinicians can be able to know what's out there and how they can bring it in. And if families haven't been connected to places like home care yet, how can they know what exists and how they can bring it in? Because that's a massive challenge.
Absolutely. Tracy, did you want to weigh in on any of the challenges?
I think one of there's a couple of challenges, but there's also a couple of opportunities that I would love to share with people that may help them on their journeys. In terms of challenges, one of the things that we've just recently discovered is the challenge in actually recruiting study participants. Now, we've been very blessed to work with Northwood Continuing Care and Shanix out in Nova Scotia, but there is a challenge in recruiting studies, and it's one of the areas I think there may be an opportunity actually for our post-secondary education institutions to maybe partner up with their business schools or their marketing students to help them market the actual studies. I think there may be a little bit of an opportunity there to bring in some additional help to actually market these to boost participation in studies. that's one of the recent challenges that we've found. But one of the things I would absolutely encourage people to do, especially if they're developing any kind of a product per se, whether it be a technology-based product or a physical hardware product like ours, is to start prototyping immediately. You know, ours started, and Liam, I wish he were here because he actually started with 2x4s and plywood and taking apart car jacks and taking apart drills and all of those things to just in a very, very, very cheap way, try out a bunch of different designs where we could finally sort of settle on a basic concept through functional mock-ups. They actually worked, but then kind of evolved there in actual prototypes. So that's something I would really encourage people to do. And I don't think enough people embrace that, like really early creative prototyping using stuff they've got around the house or the garage. So
Okay, that's super helpful. And I'm going to stick with you, Tracy, for one more minute, just because I notice a theme that's coming up in the chat, specifically, I think with respect to your product. And so one, somebody asks, do you know, I know this is early days. The question is, do you know if it can be funded by ADP like other walkers? And I think you're not quite there yet, but have you thought about the possible funding models for your product? And then just kind of, there's another question that is similar in nature, that talks about, well, so the question is, do you have input from the end users throughout? It's, as an older adult with mobility issues, I think you've checked all the boxes, but again, one of the missing pieces of info is the cost. And so maybe reflecting both on kind of the cost and then maybe the funding models, that would be really helpful.
yeah, just and in terms of just the brief question there about input from end users throughout, we absolutely did, starting right back with our, well, it was all founded based on my own lived experience. So I feel like I had my own living lab right here observing and just constantly picking mom and dad's brains about what they could do and trying things out and testing little things like, Dad, can you hoist yourself up onto a step? It was terrible. I feel like I was using my parents' lab rats. But they were totally bought into what Liam and I and Sue Ling at the time were trying to do, and the sideways advice we were getting and help from my husband and my older brother. And so that started right at the beginning, and then we really expanded out quickly. So right from through all of our prototyping, we were constantly getting feedback from clinicians and experts who were working with older adults and people with mobility challenges and end users themselves. But on the cost issue, it's not in the price range of a typical rollator walker. It's more aligned with the price ranges of powered lifts that are out there, because that's its primary purpose, as a lift. We just happen to build it into a standard mobility device that everybody uses today and that everybody's familiar with, and it's compact and it can be used at home and taken with you wherever you go. But it is on the price on parity with pricing of powered lifts. And we will be applying for sure to the Alberta Aids to Daily Living program that Noelannah referenced earlier, and the Ontario Assistive Devices program, because those are the two provinces and two jurisdictions in Canada that actually have a structured mobility and medical device funding program. Sadly, the other provinces haven't quite gotten there yet, and I really hope that they do. But we're also going to, intend to be working with Veterans Affairs Canada for veterans that are across Canada for funding as well, because they're very, very interested in what we're doing. We're going to have to be talking to insurance companies to help with subsidy, because there's an absolute business case for both our publicly funded medical systems that we have in Canada, because we are convinced this will reduce EMS calls, it will reduce admission, falls related hospitalizations, et cetera, and admissions to, long-term care. So we are super, super keen to be engaging with the various funding and paying organizations, because we certainly recognize, most seniors, or a large number of them, live on fixed incomes.
Okay, thank you so much. You touched on some really critical considerations. I'll move on to the next question. The question is, so the first, a comment, thanks for sharing good examples. What are some other examples of age tech that supports autonomy and independence? So I think, Lili, not to put you on the spot, but I think you had maybe some other examples you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, happy to. I think these are emerging, but they actually are either available or just not well known. Would be all the various applications of artificial intelligence, natural language processing, machine learning. Really, these are just big words for automating large sets of data. And I think that and the data can be actual data collected, for example, on a person's movement, medical records data, or it could be visual, like imaging and those kinds of camera data that we get from monitoring devices. So I think that the exciting future is that we're going to see, I think, less and less of the necessity to have wearable kinds of technologies that have to be maintained. And instead, everything will sort of come together either as ambient or into one device. So apps are an exciting future, I think. And that with regard to ambient, the technology is improving such that we can actually use technology that's embedded into an environment or put into an existing environment that that need less monitoring or infrastructure, but also that it can be applied to multiple individuals. There's historically, I think, a tendency for technology to focus on monitoring just one individual who is vulnerable or needs help. But the reality is that if you have one older adult in an environment, they're going to be living with others that also require assistance. So they'll have different needs. So more sort of along the personalized approach to using these technologies. Another, I think, innovation that is emerging is just through the process of consumer technologies. So while Tracy's innovation will be she'll be seeking, Health Canada level approval, and there's different apps that are going through that as well. More and more now, I think there are some very good health applications out there for folks to use, and they're becoming incorporated into research. Physicians or health professionals are recommending certain ones. They're going through research testing. We ourselves, our team, have developed an app rating scale for consumers themselves to actually determine if an app meets their criteria for use. So there's more of this available that will make it more widespread, more affordable, more accessible, rather than having to always go through a sort of a medical and sort of a service. But one thing I do want to mention as well is we talk about innovation. I want to also talk about or point out that innovation can also occur in the entrepreneurial sphere. So Tracy's doing some great work in our original GPS global positioning system wearable device study. The vendor actually clued in relatively quickly when we got into the study that relatively early that in fact people living with dementia can change their function can change relatively quickly. And so it made no sense for them as entrepreneurs as a vendor to lock people into the typical, mobile agreement of 1 year. And so they were able to provide monthly service that way. Unfortunately, I think some of that is no longer available, but those are the kinds of practices that we want to encourage vendors to consider and really try and make your revenue through quantity rather than charging a small number of people. So in that way, sort of address Noelannah's experience of making things much more, these innovations much more accessible and affordable.
And then to just be able to build off of Lili, and I know Lili already started to touch up on it, is that where things are going right now, it's all based off of existing technologies, which is making things much more accessible. So we think of a smartphone. I know we assume that seniors don't have smartphones, but more and more are. Like it's happening. And then even when it comes to smartphones, so our smartwatches. So smartwatches, they have fall detection devices. I got one for my grandpa myself because if he falls, I will get a text if he falls. Because a lot of times the older technologies, they have to push a button. I guarantee he's not going to push a button because he's not going to want to bother me. Same thing with Alexa. We see lots of individuals living with dementia where they're able to talk to Alexa and ask her to turn on the lights. So then if they're too far and it's hard for them to get there, they can do that, or sending different reminders for their medications. All this is starting to be embedded in the technologies we have in our pockets, which is really exciting.
Okay, great. And this actually leads very nicely to another question in the chat. And I think this is directed towards Tracy. Are you focused only on the medical product classification because of access to public funding, or can you concurrently sell directly to the public before medical certification?
Unfortunately, we can't. Because it is a mobility device, it does fall under the jurisdiction of Health Canada in Canada and the US Food and Drug Administration in the US, and same thing with regulatory bodies in Europe and Japan and around the world. Because it is a mobility device, we cannot take it out to market without the concurrence and the approval of the governing bodies, the regulating bodies. And it's for good reason, because it is a mobility device, and unfortunately it's targeted at what you might call a semi-vulnerable population. And I wouldn't give it to my parents if it weren't regulated and a verified and validated. And that's the standards to which we're designing, engineering and fabricating. This is, we all want to build it to the quality level that we would feel comfortable giving it to our own, having our own parents use it.
Yeah, that's really important, obviously, to uphold all of those standards. I think probably the question is reflective of the eagerness, right, for people to be able to start using these technologies as soon as possible because of how valuable they are. Okay, so we only have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one more question, and if each of the panelists wants to take maybe a minute or less to reflect on this, that would be great, and we'll wrap up after that. So the question is, what are some exciting possibilities for the future of AgeTech solutions that support autonomy and independence? What is on the horizon? Tracy's got her hand up. Okay, Tracy first, and then maybe Lili, and then Noelannah.
So yeah, the one thing that is kind of exciting that we're looking at and already getting some sort of market feedback on it, and have baked it into our patent already, because we were anticipating this from day one, is the ability for our device, because a lot of older adults do live alone. And if they happen to be in a place or a position where they're not exactly right beside the device, we want them to be able to press a button and taking Noelannah's feedback into account there, they're not calling for another person, they're calling the device. So they're summoning the device, and the device will autonomously, so I'm borrowing your word, but autonomously navigate and propel itself to reach the user. So we are looking at a down the road, it's a couple of years down the road, but a smarter device that somebody can summon themselves, and it will autonomously navigate its way to them to be used. The technologies are out there. It's just a matter of building them, designing them, and refining them a little bit, and putting them all together in the right way.
Exciting. Thank you. Lili?
I had to jump in.
That's great. That's great, Tracy. I would say more of sort of as a cultural change or a mindset change that I see is emerging, and that is something I alluded to earlier, is just the boundaries between consumer products, consumer accessible products, and medical or health related kinds of products is merging. And we're seeing that gray area, which means that, and as the populations age, coming from, an era where they are much more familiar with technology, and stronger advocacy, self-advocacy. We're seeing more and more demand on the market to respond to their needs. So my perhaps comment would be for all consumers and users to, whether you're a professional or an everyday individual or a care partner, to not be intimidated by technology and consider yourself an expert to begin with, because in the end, for these products to be successful, they have to be adopted. And for them to be adopted, they have to have user input. And I would say Tracy's innovation of Raymax is a perfect example. We're not all going to, coming from lived experience, we're not all going to be able to go as far as she did in terms of designing and selling the product, but we certainly can have a role in the input in that.
Excellent. And last word, Noelannah.
Yeah, I will just finish up with just it's exciting what the future of AgeWell. So AgeWell's been around for 9 years. They're continuing, and I feel that AgeWell will be able to continue to help us with the implementation of these amazing technologies that are coming out. So the Envisage initiative, it's Alberta Health Services is a part of it. I've been chatting with them, so we know that there's gaps with the implementation, but luckily, thanks to AgeWell, it's bringing us into that center point where we all know where to go, and they're able to assist us in having these conversations, so then we can create the technology, but then again, work with the health systems to make it happen. So always thanks to AgeWell.
I love that as the final note. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for. We're already at time, 2 o'clock. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much to the panelists for a really engaging conversation. Don't forget that if you'd like to watch this webinar again or share it with a friend, you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel in about a week. So thank you so much, everybody. Take care. We look forward to seeing you at the next AgeWell webinar. Have a great day. Bye.